Time is a lie. Your past and future are happening right now. Put your hand over the send button. Feel that split-second tremor, the surge in your chest, the voice that says wait, the other voice that says go. Here's the gut punch. The version of you who presses and the version who doesn't are not waiting in the wings. One of them is already etched into the universe like a fossil you haven't uncovered yet. We think choices carve the future. What if they reveal it? Einstein shattered now. Quantum labs twist causality without letting you mail a letter to yesterday. To feel that, we'll rip up the idea of time as a flow and show you the map your life is already written on. The lie of now, fracturing common sense. If now isn't real the way we feel it, then the ground under choice, memory, even meaning starts to shift. So let's start simple. You reach for coffee, 2 mugs on the counter. Your hand hovers, you pick the left one. It feels like a live moment. But in the block universe picture, that hand, that hesitation, that pick, all of it is a coordinate in space-time, like an address on a map. You didn't move through time to get there. Your world line, your path through space-time, already includes it. To see how this breaks common sense, we have to watch clocks disagree. Einstein's first fracture shows up with simultaneity. The claim, what's at the same time for you is at the same time for someone moving differently. That's not philosophy. It's baked into the speed of light being constant for every observer. Here's the classic scene told as people, not diagrams. 2 maintenance workers stand on a long, straight rail bridge. Call them Mara and Lewis. Lightning hits both ends of the bridge. Mara stands dead center. She sees both bolts at once, 2 white flashes, a single clap rolling over the river. They were simultaneous, she says, certain. Meanwhile, Lewis is jogging toward the east end. He sees the east strike first, then the west. He's not confused, his eyes aren't slow. For him, because he's moving toward one flash and away from the other, the arrival time split. He insists the east flash happened earlier. Mara and Lewis watched the same sky and came back with different nows. Who's wrong? Neither. Relativity says simultaneity is relative to motion. What nobody knew at the time Mara spoke is that her now slices spacetime differently than Lewis's. Picture a loaf of bread as spacetime. A present is a slice through that loaf. Change your motion and you tilt the knife. Your slice cuts through different events. Once you accept that, a universal present evaporates. There isn't a master slice that everyone shares. The human cost of that idea lands quietly and hard. If there's no single now, what anchors a life? Presentism. The belief only the present exists feels like sanity. Eternalism. The block universe view where past, present, and future all coexist, sounds cold at first. But watch what happens when you follow the consequences. Stakes first. If the present is all that's real, then death is an absolute erasure and memory is just brain noise in motion. If the block is real, the person you lost still exists as a full stretch of spacetime. Childhood laughter, eye crinkles, last words, all still there, not moving like cities on a map you can't drive back to but which never vanished. That doesn't cancel grief, it reframes it. Your love isn't chasing a receding ghost. It's contact with a region of the block your path already crossed. Okay, action. How do we define the block universe without turning this into a textbook? Think of spacetime as a 4-dimensional landscape. Every event, your birth, this sentence, the coffee pick, a star collapsing 1 billion light years away, sits somewhere in that landscape. You don't flow from one to the next. Your world line threads through them. Different observers carve different presents across that landscape depending on how they move. That's why 2 astronauts in relative motion can both be right about what's simultaneous and disagree with each other. Meanwhile, something else is happening that keeps the emotional pressure on. Relativity doesn't just play with light and thought experiments, it shows up in families. 2 twins separate. One travels fast and comes home slightly younger. That's not science fiction, it's a measured effect in pilots and satellites. If now were universal, that couldn't happen. In a block picture, both outcomes, older twin, younger twin, are coordinates on 2 world lines that diverged and rejoined. The disagreement isn't a glitch, it's geometry. Impact, Presentism promises warmth and certainty but runs into physics. Eternalism feels like ice water but matches what our best theories say about simultaneity and time dilation. The cost is psychological. If the future exists, do choices still matter? Hold that for a minute. There's a trap in how we think about flow. Cognitive dissonance shows up right here. When people hear the future is fixed, it clashes with a core self-model. I am an agent who can do otherwise. That clash isn't a math error, it's a survival response. Psychologically, we protect autonomy because it signals control, predicts outcomes, and keeps responsibility meaningful. A fixed future claim feels like an autonomy threat, so the mind pushes back with motivated reasoning. Physics can't be saying that. Scientists always change their minds. My experience of choosing is proof. None of these are foolish. They're attempts to keep a coherent self intact. Brains evolve to minimize prediction error and defend valued identities. If I choose is central to identity, any story that sounds like you're just along for the ride spikes dissonance. Tension between beliefs, I steer, and evidence, relativity, undercuts a universal now time dilation is real. People resolve that tension in familiar ways, downweight the evidence, reinterpret the claim, or add a new belief that restores agency. Maybe physics leaves room for me. That resistance is natural, not a logical flaw. It's a signal to clarify terms. Eternalism says the landscape exists. It doesn't say your processes don't matter. Agency can live inside the landscape as the specific pattern your brain implements. Naming the threat lowers the threat. Here's a micro story that turns the screw. A paramedic freezes on a staircase, 3rd floor, smoke rising, 2 doors, 1 voice. She steps left, kicks, pulls a kid out. In her memory, that choice is a cliff edge. In the block, that moment sits like a stone embedded in a wall. Does that drain the courage out of it? Or does it say something else? That courage is part of the wall itself, not painted on later by regret. What nobody tells you early is that our feeling of now is a construction. Brains bind events arriving at slightly different times into a single update. Your present is a messy, rolling buffer with a lag. When observers move differently, their buffers stitch different sets of events into a now. It's not just clocks that disagree. Lives do. This was the moment everything changed for Einstein's readers. If simultaneity breaks, there's no master metronome to which all things keep time. Your now slides with your velocity. That's why GPS satellites run their clocks fast on purpose to match ours. If they didn't, your map would drift down the street. The technology you trust every day quietly takes sides against a universal present. So where does that leave meaning? Between two poles. Presentism offers an intuitive anchor that fails under scrutiny. Eternalism offers a stable structure that can feel like it steals the wind from choice. The emotional cost of each is different. One risks denial, the other risks numbness. But there's one more fracture we need before we talk about choosing in a fixed landscape. If simultaneity breaks, clocks don't agree, neither do lives. And if lives don't share a single present, now starts to look like a habit of creatures that keep records, not a property of the universe. If that's true, then we've been chasing the river and ignoring the riverbed. And the riverbed is where the real shock is waiting. When clocks disagree, reality splits. While Mara and Lewis argued about lightning on the bridge, something else was happening in the world that would force this from thought experiment to daily life. Your now doesn't just tilt with your motion, it slides. And when it slides, the world stops agreeing on what time it is, or even who has lived more of it. Stakes first. If your now can change just because you changed speed, then memory, aging, deadlines, heartbeats, everything we count becomes local. Your biography isn't stamped by a master clock. It's stamped by the path you take. That means two people can meet, hug, compare watches, and both be right while disagreeing. If that sounds abstract, watch what happens on rails. Einstein's train runs at high speed across a flat plain. 2 lightning bolts strike the ends of the car as a passenger, Anya, sits mid-car reading. Out by the track, a station master, Reed, lines his shoes with the ties and watches. Anya swears the strikes were not simultaneous. The front flash reached her first. Reed swears they were simultaneous. He saw them hit together. They take their watches out. Reed points. The distances to each strike were equal. Anya shrugs. She was moving toward one and away from the other, so the light reached her at different times. They argue about fairness. But under the argument is a deeper fracture. They're simultaneous planes. Those slices through the loaf aren't the same. Motion has picked their slice of now. Action tightens when clocks start walking. Picture two identical atomic clocks. One sits in a lab on the ground. The other goes for a ride on a fast jet, circles the Earth, and comes home. When you put them side by side again, they disagree. The traveling clock has ticked fewer times. Less time has passed along that path. This isn't delicate philosophy. Physicists flew those clocks and measured the difference. Airplanes, satellites, even particles screaming around accelerators all run on this geometry. Time stretches or shrinks with speed and gravity. Meanwhile, your phone relies on this. GPS satellites orbit high above, moving fast and sitting in weaker gravity than we do on the ground. Both effects matter. Special relativity makes their onboard clocks run slow due to speed. General relativity makes them run fast due to altitude. Engineers adjust the tick rate before launch and keep correcting in flight. Without those corrections, your location would drift hundreds of meters each day. Every time your map snaps you to the curb, it's because the universe refuses a universal present. Human angle. Two sisters grow up sharing birthdays and a bedroom. Years later, one becomes an astronaut, Nadia. She spends months aboard a fast-moving station, circling Earth again and again. When she returns, there's a tiny mismatch. She's younger by microseconds relative to her twin, Layla. At the party, cake candles throw yellow cones on their faces. The joke writes itself. She skipped the line. But underneath the laughter sits a new feeling. Family time isn't equal because world lines don't pay attention to our sense of fairness. Their lives diverge not just in story, but in accumulated time. Impact lands right here. If motion picks your slice of now, there's no universal present to anchor us. And if there's no master clock, we need a new way to say what reality is. We can't point at a moment and say, this is happening everywhere right now, without first asking, from whose speed? In which field of gravity? That's not a loophole, it's the architecture. But there's a complication that keeps the stakes sharp. If there's no master clock, how do we avoid chaos? How do we agree on cause and effect? Relativity answers with a constraint. Anything that can influence anything else has to do it inside a structure defined by light speed. Events that can be linked by a signal share a causal relationship that all observers will agree on. They may fight about when, but not about what can affect what. Outside that cone of influence, ordering becomes slippery. That's the crack where our intuition keeps falling. Here's a micro story that shows the crack without collapsing into paradox. A deep space probe flips its antenna to catch a burst from home. The command was sent yesterday, according to mission control. On the probe's clock, due to months of high-speed travel, less time has passed. The yesterday that shaped the command doesn't line up neatly with the probe's yesterday. And yet the maneuver works, because the signal's path lives inside that causal corridor both sides respect. They disagree about the calendar, but not about the corridor. What nobody knew when we learned to launch rockets is that precision would force humility. We stopped pretending there was one time and started building instruments that ask, what time along which world line? It sounds clinical until you realize what it does to a life. If a diary is a stack of entries written by a single hand, relativity turns it into a bundle of threads that only tie together when you ask who can reach whom. This was the moment everything changed in our story's psychology. No master present means the comfort of we're all in this moment together is a feeling our brains compose, not a fact the cosmos supplies. The good news is we still agree where it matters, inside the cones where signals fly. The bad news is we can't anchor meaning on a cosmic timestamp. We need a different ground. So we stop chasing clocks and ask a more radical question. What if the universe isn't a movie that plays, but a landscape already there, where motion just traces paths? If we accept that, then Nadia's microseconds and your morning commute aren't exceptions. They're the geometry showing through. And geometry has a way of telling you what's permitted before you ever take a step. Space-time as landscape. You don't travel, you're traced. While we were busy arguing with clocks, the ground under our feet quietly changed shape. If there's no master now, stop thinking of time as a river you float down. Think of the whole landscape already laid out, hills, valleys, cities, and your life as the path that's etched through it. You're not moving through time, you're the trace. Stakes first, because this reframes almost everything. If your world line is already inscribed, then birthdays aren't flowing past, they're coordinates. The day you first rode a bike, the number on the hospital door where you met your daughter, the afternoon you didn't say what you should have, none of these slide away. They sit where they always sat, in the block. That sounds cold until you feel what it protects. Grief doesn't mean your person is gone in some absolute sense. They exist along a full stretch, the way a city exists on a map whether or not you're standing in it. Your love isn't chasing smoke. It's pointing to a location you once inhabited together. Action, let's make the block concrete. Picture a translucent atlas. On one page is the map of your life. The place you were born, the street where you skinned your knee, the address where you laughed too hard that one winter night, the studio where you're hearing this. Each place is a space-time event, not a moment that comes and goes. Your world line is a curve threading those points. Meanwhile, other people's curves cross and loop near yours, some braiding tightly for years, some touching once and drifting away. No film reel runs. There's a static structure, and motion is just the path across it. Here's the human angle that cuts. Birthdays become coordinates. The cake at 7 with dinosaur candles, the awkward 13 with a lopsided haircut, the quiet 32 where you finally told the truth. They're not vanishing milestones. They're fixtures. Grief becomes geometry, not loss without remainder. When you revisit a video, a voicemail, a corner of town, you aren't summoning a ghost. You're orienting yourself relative to a region that still exists in the block. That won't stop the ache, but it can give the ache a frame. Impact. In this picture, motion stops being a journey and becomes a selection. The curve you take isn't chosen by stepping through a flow. It's the particular path your body and brain trace, already consistent with the block's constraints. It's like hiking a route that's already highlighted on a trail map. You can't hop to a different printed line by wishing, but within your line there are switchbacks, steep bits, plateaus, each with their own character. Courage, fear, habit, love. These aren't decorations added after the fact. They're features of the terrain along your path. But there's one problem everyone feels the second they accept this. If it's all laid out, where does choosing lie? If the world line is drawn, are you just a bead sliding on a wire? This is the trap, and it gets tighter if you think the arrow of time is the thing doing the pushing. We reach for flow to protect agency. We don't need it. Agency can sit inside the block if we understand what the arrow really is. Micro story to ground that. A chef preps for service. He's plating, calling orders, tiny decisions firing, salt here, hold there, fire table 4. In the block, those decisions aren't conjured from emptiness as the second hand sweeps. They're realized properties of his neural dynamics, his training, the constraints of the kitchen, the orders hanging on the pass. The world line through those minutes includes a dense forest of micro choices that are as real as the copper pans. He isn't a spectator of his path. He is the process that makes that path what it is. What nobody tells you early enough is that choosing is a pattern, not a sparkle. It's the brain implementing selection under constraints, and that pattern is part of the block's geometry. The feel of openness, the sense that forks are live, comes from information. Where you have records, the past feels fixed. Where records haven't yet accumulated, the future feels open. We mistake that difference in information for a flow. It's more like a heads-up display updating as you move. Here's where it gets interesting. There's a loophole hiding in entropy, but it's not an escape hatch from the block. It's a way to understand why one direction along your world line feels different. Eggs break, perfume spreads, hard drives fill, records pile up in one temporal direction. That accumulation is what your brain tracks. The arrow you feel isn't a cosmic conveyor belt. It's an information gradient your body surfs. Impact again, now sharper. When you see your life as a line that's already there, you don't lose authorship, you locate it. Authorship is the specific microstructure of that line. Which synapses wired when you trained, which stories you rehearsed until they were instinct, which commitments you bound yourself to. You can't step outside the block, but you can change where the block roots you by changing constraints you carry along your path. That's not magic, that's mechanics. So we follow the arrow not as time's flow, but as entropy's clue to see why cups don't unbreak, why memory points one way, and where the sensation of now comes from. The river isn't moving. Your dashboard is updating. That's the pivot that unlocks what comes next. The arrow isn't time, it's information. Follow the arrow, we said. Here, S where it leads. We keep mistaking a dashboard for the engine. What feels like time flowing is your brain updating against a world where records pile up in one direction. The arrow you ride isn't a current, it's a gradient of information. Stakes first. If the arrow is information, then the way we grieve, hope, plan, even judge each other changes. You're not moving forward because some cosmic metronome is beating. You're moving because your brain keeps writing and reading records that only grow in one direction. When those records break, people fall out of time. Amnesia, dementia, hard drive failure of the self. That's not poetic. It's a reminder that what we call now lives or dies with our capacity to store correlations. Action, watch the mundane chain that reveals the rule. You drop an egg, it shatters, yolk spidering out. You spritz perfume, it spreads, molecules wandering and mixing into air. You copy photos from your phone to a backup drive. The drive fills. The photos aren't arranged by fate, just by the order you made and saved them. In each case, microstates, tiny configurations, go from fewer, special arrangements to more numerous, sloppy ones. That's entropy increasing, not doom, just counting. There are more ways for things to be jumbled than pristine, so the universe explores jumbled. Now throw memory into the mix. Your hippocampus writes traces, synaptic weight changes when you encode a scene. Those traces are records. They point from your present state to correlations with a previous state of the world. The sound of a laugh, the curve of a road, the smell of rain. Instruments do the same. Film grains darken. Bits flip from to one. Fossils capture bone patterns in rock. These are all footprints that gather toward the higher entropy side of your world line. The past looks fixed because you're drowning in footprints pointing that way. The future feels open because those footprints don't exist, yet. Here's a micro story, a server room after midnight. Cold air, green LEDs. A tech checks logs for a glitch that knocked out payments at 3:14 p.m. She scrolls line by line, timestamps, process IDs, a spike in errors. That log is a record, an information trail that narrows what could have happened. There's no comparable log for 3:14 p.m. tomorrow. Not because tomorrow isn't in the block, but because she hasn't written the trail. The asymmetry lives in the records, not in time itself. Complication. The fundamental equations we use, Newton's laws, Maxwell's, Schrödinger's equation, Einstein's field equations, are to a remarkable extent time-symmetric. Reverse the sign of t in the math and the equations still describe valid evolutions. They don't demand a direction. So where does the arrow come from? Boundary conditions. Start the universe in a very low entropy macrostate, uniform, smooth, simple, and almost all typical evolutions from there lead to higher entropy. That's the past hypothesis in philosophy of physics language. The arrow is born from an initial boundary, not from the laws. Meanwhile, something else is happening that explains your present. Your brain doesn't experience individual photons or sound waves the instant they touch you. It collects inputs over short windows, tens to hundreds of milliseconds, and binds them into an integrated update. That binding gives you a coherent now. Change the binding window with drugs, fatigue, injury, or age, and now stretches or stutters. Psychological time isn't the universe flowing, it's your nervous system's refresh rate. Impact. Once you see the arrow as information, a lot of strange behavior stops being mysterious. We don't remember the future because there aren't records pointing that way accessible to us. We can predict, model, simulate, but those are forward-looking summaries built from past records and state estimates. The asymmetry in our knowledge, past dense, future sparse, creates the subjective sense of openness. And that sense is useful. It lets you plan, improvise, create. But it's not a proof that the future is unreal. Here's where it gets uncomfortable. Quantum experiments complicate the comfort we take in fixed past. Delayed choice setups show correlations that make it look like present decisions define the past behavior of particles. They don't send messages backward, and they don't let you change your grandmother's lunch. But they do suggest that what counts as a record is subtler at small scales. Still, even there, the no-signaling constraint and the growth of records protect the arrow you live inside. Your brain, your lab, your environment are macroscopic record factories. Micro story, softer this time. A parent finds a crayon sun on a wall behind a bookshelf when they move apartments. They laugh, take a photo, text it to a teenager who barely remembers drawing it. That sun is a record. It reaches across years, anchoring a memory, shaping a feeling. There's no comparable crayon mark from a future kitchen reaching back. Not because the future isn't real, but because the mark hasn't been laid down along your worldline's accessible past. What nobody tells you until you need it is that caring runs on records. You love who you can recognize, who you have data about, who sits in your ledger of shared traces, tickets, texts, scars, songs, rituals. The arrow of care tilts the same way entropy does because care attaches to what's been correlated with you. So the reveal lands clean. The past looks fixed because records exist. The future feels open because records don't, yet. Your psychological now is your brain's update cycle riding an information gradient in a universe whose basic rules don't prefer a direction but whose boundaries did. You weren't pushed downstream, you refreshed. Transition and a warning. If the arrow is information, can quantum randomness rescue freedom? We reach for noise like it's oxygen. But randomness isn't authorship. And quantum weirdness, entanglement, delayed choice, warps causality without handing you an escape hatch. Next, we'll walk into that lab and see why the block can bend our intuitions without breaking them. Quantum weirdness does save free will, but it warps causality. We've followed the arrow to information, not flow. Now the lab doors hiss open. This is where people try to rescue freedom with randomness. Maybe quantum dice rolls inside the brain give me wiggle room. I get why that feels good. But noise isn't authorship, it's just noise. Stakes first. If you pin your freedom on quantum coin flips, you hand your life to chance. Heads, you say the thing. Tails, you don't. That doesn't feel like you. We want agency to mean reasons, not roulette. So the question isn't, is there randomness? It's, do quantum correlations change how causes fit together? Yes, just not the way you hope. Action, start with entanglement. Two photons are born in a common process. Measure one here, you learn something about the other over there, even if no time remains to send a signal. It looks like instant mind reading. It is. The results line up in strong patterns only when you compare notes later. That later matters. No message outruns light. The web tightens without breaking the speed limit. Now walk into the delayed choice maze. A single photon heads toward a setup that can behave like a wave or a particle depending on whether you recombine its paths. Here's the twist. You decide whether to recombine after the photon has passed the first beam splitter. When you choose to recombine, you get interference, wave-like behavior, as if the photon took both paths. When you don't, you get which path marks, particle behavior, as if it took one. It feels like your present choice decides the photon's earlier character. Get this, physicists built versions where the which decision is randomized by a fast device so you can't quietly cheat with timing. The correlations hold anyway, but read the fine print. You're not sending messages to the past. You're selecting which joint pattern emerges across the whole arrangement. The past is part of a solution that includes your later settings. The block view loves this. It says the experiment's outcomes are a consistent global fit, not a story told frame by frame. Micro story. A grad student named Priya babysits the detectors on the night shift. Coffee gone cold, she flips the recombiner in and out according to a high-speed randomizer. The plots line up, with recombiner fringes without two fat lumps. She texts her supervisor, "Looks like the photon waited to see what I'd do." He replies, "Or your choice and its past sat in the same web." She stares at the graph and realizes the discomfort isn't that anything broke causality. It's that causality isn't a straight road. It's a map with loops that never let you mail a letter backwards. Complication. Interpretations fight about the bookkeeping. Many Worlds says, "No collapse, the photon explores all branches, and your later setting puts you in the branch that shows fringes or lumps." Retrocausal stories say, the hidden variables can depend on future settings, so influences run both ways within the block's constraints. Others keep collapse but stress no signaling. Pick your flavor. What unites them is cruel to simple freedom talk. None of them hand you a place outside the web to author without constraint. Human angle. Remember that coin flip you once did to make a free call? Heads, quit the job, tails, stay. You flipped. It landed. You nodded like fate had spoken. Later, you told yourself a story that made it sound like you chose. In the quantum lab, that coin is entangled with the apparatus, the environment, even your neurons warming the switch. The feeling of "I could have gone either way" is real as a feeling, but the correlations that make the graph come out are merciless. Impact. Quantum weirdness warps how we draw arrows between events. It lets the future setting co-author the statistics of the past measurement without allowing a paradox or a message from tomorrow. It kills the easy picture of causes pushing from left to right across a timeline. But it doesn't rescue libertarian free will. Randomness isn't you. Branching isn't a throne outside physics. Retrocausality isn't a hotline where your future self edits your yesterday. Here's the part that matters if you're trying to live. Agency survives in a different suit. Your choices are processes, high-level patterns realized in brains that are steeped in thermal noise, shaped by learning, and embedded in environments. Those patterns can be robust. You train so your responses aren't coin flips. You design cues and commitments so your internal predictors and the world's feedback lock you into better trajectories. In a block picture, that's you writing constraints into your own world line. Micro story with teeth. A recovering addict deletes numbers, changes routines, moves apartments. The randomness of craving spikes doesn't author her. The constraints she engineers do. Months later, faced with a bad day, the urge hits. She texts a sponsor because that path is now easier than the bar. When you zoom out, the graph of her life shows a rerouting that had to include noise but wasn't ruled by it. That's authorship inside physics. What nobody tells you when they say quantum frees you is that quantum hands you a richer causal web and asks you to become specific inside it. Your reasons can be stable patterns even when the micro is fuzzy. Your commitments can shape the macro even when the lab laughs at straight arrows. So the reveal stands. Quantum didn't free us. It tied our choices to the past we thought was gone, through correlations that respect every speed limit and still make our stories feel strange. Next, we'll stare into the darkest ledger we know, black holes, and see why the universe may be keeping records far more carefully than we ever imagined. Horizons, information, and the no-escape lesson. We left the quantum lab with a hard truth. Correlations can stretch across time without letting you send a memo to yesterday. Now we walk to the edge of the universe's strictest boundary and ask what survives. Stakes are high here because this isn't just physics, it's the bookkeeping of reality. If information dies, then meaning can vanish in fire. If it doesn't, the universe is a ledger that keeps everything. Action first. A black hole forms when matter collapses so tightly that light can't escape. The boundary you've heard about, the event horizon, isn't a wall you can touch. It's a point of no return in the geometry. Cross it inward and every path forward points deeper in. From the outside, your signals dim and redshift until they fade. For decades, the story seemed simple. Whatever falls in is gone from our universe's story. Then Stephen Hawking ran quantum field theory on curved spacetime and found something wild. The horizon should glow. Particle pairs pop out of the vacuum. One falls in, one escapes. To a distant observer, the black hole slowly radiates, Hawking radiation, and loses mass as if it's evaporating. That created the information paradox. If a black hole can fully evaporate into featureless radiation, where does the information about what fell in go? Physics hates losing information. The equations that evolve quantum states are reversible. They don't allow a generic erase. Meanwhile, something else was happening that changed the tone. String theory and quantum gravity gave us the holographic hint. The amount of information you can pack into a region scales with the area of its boundary, not its volume. That's the Bekenstein-Hawking entropy formula, entropy proportional to the horizon's area. It's like saying the universe writes its notes on surfaces. Black holes, the most extreme objects, are also the cleanest billboards. Microstory. A graduate student named Alina sits in a seminar room at 7 p.m., doors propped, the whiteboard a mess of light cones and integrals. The speaker writes S equals A in natural units and underlines it twice. Alina circles it in her notebook, then scrawls, Y area. 2 years later, she's debugging code for a numerical relativity run, and the only thing that keeps matching is that the horizon's area behaves like information capacity. She texts a friend, the universe budgets reality by surface. Complication. If black holes radiate and the horizon's area encodes entropy, what happens to the details? Several lines of argument converge. The information isn't destroyed. It's encoded in subtle correlations in the outgoing radiation and/or scrambled on the horizon. The Page curve, named after Don Page, predicts that radiation starts out thermal but after a while begins to carry information out, rising and then falling in entropy as the hole shrinks. Recent calculations using replica wormholes support this qualitative picture. Unitary evolution can be consistent with evaporation if you count the right quantum entanglement. Human angle. There's a version of you that lives in this metaphor. Think of you as a pattern, not the atoms. Your photos, messages, micro-expressions your friends recognize, the gate your dog hears down the hall. These are encodings on boundaries other people share with you. In a strong sense, you already exist as a spread-out profile across surfaces. Phones, memories, paperwork, pixels. A black hole pushes that idea to the limit. Whatever falls in is smeared across a horizon and, in some accounts, slowly released in a scrambled stream. Disturbing, yes. Also clarifying. Patterns matter. Impact hits when you fold the holographic hint back into the block universe. If reality is best thought of as an information geometry, states, correlations, constraints, then now is just a readout state. It's the page you're currently able to decode given your position and records, not a global feature of the cosmos. That ledger model fits the block well. The whole web exists. What you can read depends on where and who you are. Microstory, softer but sharp. A son clears his mother's apartment after she's gone. In a shoebox, he finds letters she never mailed, addressed to an old friend. He reads them at the kitchen table, each page releasing a version of her he didn't know. Those letters are delayed Hawking quanta, boundaries leaking pattern, years after the collapse that felt final. She isn't back, but something real crossed the horizon he thought was absolute. Complication remains. The paradox isn't fully closed in every framework. How exactly information rides out, how complementarity avoids contradictions, whether firewalls burn the horizon, these are active debates. But the weight of evidence leans toward no destruction. Reality keeps the ledger balanced, even if the bookkeeping is alien to us. So the reveal lands. If the universe is a ledger, then every secret you keep is already in the accounting, not as fate, but as pattern. And the no-escape lesson isn't fatalistic, it's ethical. What you write into the world line, habits, promises, harms, repairs, becomes part of a record others can, in principle, decode. You don't get to make it vanish. That's not a threat, it's a call. What nobody tells you when they sell time as flow is that boundaries run the show. Event horizons in space, legal boundaries in cities, social boundaries in families. They're where information collects, transforms, and sometimes escapes. In that sense, now is a boundary posture, which surfaces you're facing, which channels you're tuned to, which ledgers you're updating. So we come back to agency with a stricter frame. If reality is a block with a ledger, then choice is the pattern of updates your process writes to those surfaces. You can't escape the record, but you can become deliberate about what gets encoded. Next, we'll ask the question you've been holding since the coffee. What is choice when choices are coordinates? And how do you own it from inside? The free will trap choices as coordinates. We've walked to the ledger and stared at the boundary. Now we turn back to the room where the coffee sat and ask the question that won't let go. If your decisions are coordinates in the block, what is choosing? Stakes first. If choice collapses to coordinates, meaning feels threatened, love, courage, responsibility, do they get flattened into scenery? Or can we keep them real from inside the geometry? Here's the move that matters: compatibilism. It says your choices are real as processes implemented by you, by the organism whose world line we've been tracing. Not magic outside physics. Agency as a pattern within it. Action, let's define the thing without losing the human thread. A decision isn't a spark from nowhere. It's the output of a system. Your brain integrating goals, memories, predictions, values, and context under constraints. In the block, that integrative process is a segment of your world line with a particular microstructure. You don't need a cosmic pause button to author it. You need the structure to be yours. Learned, rehearsed, cared for, sensitive to reasons. That's the kind of freedom worth wanting. Dennett's phrase, because it locates authorship in the capacity to act for reasons you endorse. Human angle, a therapist's office late afternoon. Jamal sits on the couch, hands folded, jaw tight. He's been saying, I didn't have a choice about lashing out at work. The therapist doesn't lecture metaphysics, she maps constraints. Sleep debt, money anxiety, a boss who sneers, a script he learned at 12. Then she adds new constraints, breathing drills that interrupt the spiral, a rule to step outside before replying, an agreement with a friend to call within 5 minutes of a trigger. Over weeks, a different pattern bites. The flare still surges, but the call happens first. The words soften. The meeting ends without smoke. From the outside, those moments are coordinates. From the inside, that's choosing, recognizing constraints and writing new ones. Impact. Responsibility reframes cleanly here. In the block, you authored your world line from inside by becoming the kind of system that responds to reasons in stable ways. Credit and blame aren't cosmic lightning bolts. They're social feedback loops that shape patterns. Praise reinforces trajectories we want more of. Accountability discourages those that harm. Ethics survives because it never needed a magical carve-out. It needed leverage on patterns that can change through learning and incentives. Complication, could have done otherwise, haunts this room. In the strictest sense, given the exact state of the universe, you could not have done otherwise in this world line. But counterfactuals still matter. They describe neighboring routes the same agent would take under slightly different constraints, different inputs, different training, different cues. Those routes exist as possibilities in your policy, even if not realized on this path. That's enough to ground our everyday use. You could have done otherwise means your capacity set includes alternatives that become real when we alter the right levers. Micro story with edge. A violinist botches a phrase in a live performance, hands trembling. After she rewatches, wincing. A week later, her teacher drills a tiny bow articulation, adds a silent count before the entry, insists she sleep 8 hours before concerts. Next show, the phrase lands. Did she do otherwise? In this world line, yes, because her constraints changed. The counterfactual wasn't fantasy. It was a nearby path made reachable by design. Identity preservation, why the self survives this. Seeing yourself as a pattern inside physics doesn't flatten you, it focuses you. The self isn't a ghost that floats above neurons. It's a stable, richly layered policy implemented by a body and brain, memories, skills, values, attachments, resilient across time and medium. That's why people who lose neurons in injury can still be recognized by voice cadence or humor. Why you feel like you waking in a different room. Why your friends can predict your laugh in a text thread without punctuation. Identity is the high-level regularity that persists while the micro churns. Ego death fears are misplaced here. Determinism doesn't say you disappear. It says you are the particular structure that makes certain outputs for reasons. If anything, the block deepens identity because it secures the whole arc, childhood quirks, learned reflexes, vows kept and broken, into one coherent world line. Continuity isn't magic. It's overlap of records and policies across neighboring segments of your path. When those records are damaged, the pattern can fade. When they're reinforced, rituals, relationships, artifacts, it strengthens. You can protect and refine the self by curating the inputs and edges that stabilize the pattern you endorse. Human angle. A daughter visits her mother after surgery. Names slip, recipes don't. The mother can't recall yesterday's headline but sings the harmony to a 1970s chorus without missing. The daughter realizes the person she loves is not a single memory but a shape, rhythms of care, turns a phrase, a way the eyes soften at a joke. She preserves that shape by rehearsing it with her. Same tea, same song, photos pinned where the light hits. The self is not gone. It's being held in place by edges that still work. What nobody tells you is that I is not an indivisible spark you must protect from physics. It's a pattern you can clarify with practice and design. Journals, shared rituals, sleep, therapy, art, community. These are scaffolds that preserve identity by keeping records dense and policies coherent. In this frame, self-work stops being mysticism and becomes maintenance. Keep the pattern legible so it can keep choosing. What nobody tells you when they sell determinism as doom is that specificity is power. You can't step outside the block, but you can change how it uses you. Commitments, habits, allies, environments. These are tools for sculpting your response patterns. You become the person who doesn't keep alcohol at home, who schedules hard tasks in the morning, who leaves the phone in another room at dinner, who tells 3 people the draft will be sent Friday. Each is a constraint that reduces slack in the wrong direction and increases it in the right one. Human angle again, closer to bone. A parent sits at a kitchen table at 10 p.m., the apartment silent. They write a letter to their future angry self. When you feel the heat in your chest, step outside. If you can't, splash water on your face. If you can't, whisper their middle name. If you can't, walk to the doorframe and put your hand there until the shaking stops. Weeks later, the heat arrives at 5:37 p.m., noodles boiling, homework on the floor. The hand finds the doorframe. The letter is a constraint across time, authored by the same person, making a different outcome real. Impact sharper. Meaning persists because you still are the process that chooses inside the block. The dignity of agency doesn't come from metaphysical escape. It comes from the integrity of reasons pursued under pressure. The story you tell about why you did the thing, if it tracks the constraints you shaped and the values you care about, that story isn't propaganda. It's a model with predictive power. Complication remains. Beware magical thinking. Not every constraint is yours to rewrite. Bodies have limits. Economies bite. Systems corner. Compatibilism respects friction. It celebrates leverage where it exists and grieves where it doesn't. It keeps compassion close when someone's policy set is narrow because the world did not give them room. It also refuses to surrender where room can be built. Tease. There's a way to test your freedom without breaking physics. Pit prediction against intervention. If foreknowledge can be part of the cause that makes itself true, can you design commitments that co-author the forecast? That's the game we'll play next, because inside a block, the twist is that knowing and doing can lock a loop. The prediction game, when knowing doesn't open the door. We've said agency is a pattern you build, not a magic exemption. Now we try to break it with a stunt, stakes first. If the future is fixed, then hearing it shouldn't matter. But if hearing it changes what you do, then the prediction is part of the cause that makes itself true. This isn't academic. It lives in promises, threats, weather alerts, medical prognoses, market signals, places where foreknowledge bends behavior and behavior bends outcomes. Action, here's the setup. You make a commitment. Tomorrow at 9 a.m. you'll choose coffee or tea. Tonight a sealed envelope arrives from a predictor that's been eerily accurate about you, texts you send, snacks you grab, songs you skip. Inside is its forecast. You swear out loud, whatever it says, I'll do the opposite. You put the envelope on the counter. Sleep badly. 8:59 a.m. you break the seal. It reads, tea. You grab coffee, smirking, certain you've broken the spell. But step back. If the predictor knew you devow to defy, the only way for it to stay accurate was to forecast tea, because reading tea is the very cue that makes you grab coffee. It predicted the entire loop. Your vow, your reaction, your hand on the mug. Your defiance is the mechanism of its success. That's the core of the prediction game. Foreknowledge can be woven into the cause of the very event it names. Now crank the pressure with Newcomb's tension. A transparent box A contains $1,000. An opaque box B contains either or $1 million. A near-perfect predictor has already acted. If it predicted you'll take only box B, it put the million in B. If it predicted you'll take both boxes, it left B empty. You walk in and choose. One boxer say, the predictor probably already put the million there for people like me. Two boxers say, what's done is done, take both. Get $1,000 plus whatever's in B in repeated runs with good predictors. One boxers walk out rich. Why? Because they made themselves the kind of agent the predictor forecast, and that forecast set the payout. Human angle. A founder hears a mentor say, if you accept that 70% valuation, you'll fire 12 people in 9 months. She bristles and says, fine, then I won't take the deal. She doesn't. Cash is tight. She lines up smaller checks, cuts her own pay, trims features, ships later. 9 months pass, nobody's fired. Was the mentor wrong, or did the prediction become the warning that carved a new path? Her promise despite created constraints that made the dark forecast false. That's foreknowledge acting as cause, not as cage. Complication. Self-referential loops can lock outcomes when predictors are accurate. If a system can model you better than you model yourself, its output can become a lever inside your choice. That doesn't remove agency, it makes agency relational. You're now choosing in a world where signals about you feed back into you. Think credit scores, risk flags, parole predictions, recommendation engines. The forecast changes the field you act in. Some loops trap, some loops save. Micro story close to bone. You tell a friend, if I don't text you my pages by Friday 5 p.m., assume I'm stuck and call me at 5:05. Friday 4:58, you're stalling. The pending call becomes the prediction you believe. You scramble, send the draft at 5:03. Did the call make you free or cornered? It made you specific. The foreknowledge she will call became part of the cause that lifted the draft into the world. Impact. Foreknowledge can be part of the cause that makes it true or makes it false, depending on how you wire the loop. That's the trick compatibilists exploit. You don't need to outrun predictions, you recruit them. You ask, what commitments, signals, and social contracts would make the desirable forecast the easiest one to keep? You move the equilibrium. But there's a complication buried in pride. When you try to defy a good predictor just to prove you can, you often land inside the pattern it predicted, defiance included. That's not fate laughing, it's consistency. The block loves solutions that fit globally. Your vow to defy is a coordinate in that fit. If you want a different fit, change the constraints, not just the words. Human angle again. A person promises themselves they'll never smoke again. They also keep a pack in the house for guests. At 11 p.m. on a bad day, guest becomes a loophole. The next week, they tell 3 friends and throw the pack away on FaceTime. They also Venmo a charity they hate every time they slip. Now the prediction you'll smoke on bad days starts to fail because the environment, the social surface, and the penalty structure make a different outcome cheaper. They didn't beat a forecast with willpower. They changed the payoff matrix. Motivation paradox, why knowing doesn't freeze you. If it's fixed, why try? Because a clear forecast collapses ambiguity. Uncertain futures spawn option hoarding, perfectionism, and endless second-guessing. A credible prediction turns a fuzzy state space into a smaller menu, which reduces cognitive load and decision fatigue. With fewer branches to evaluate, commitment gets cheaper. Foreknowledge also sharpens stakes. When you believe if X, then Y follows, you can pre-commit, set penalties, and enlist allies that make the chosen path sticky. The loop tightens, not into a trap, but into traction. Micro-story. Ren works sales and dreads quarterly calls. Their manager shows a model. If you don't schedule 8 first touches by Tuesday noon, your close rate drops below 15% by Friday. Ren hates the determinism in that sentence and uses it anyway. Monday night, they set a calendar block, auto-text 2 warm leads, and drop 3 pre-written emails into a send queue. Tuesday at 11:45, they're at 7 touches and message a friend. Ping me if I don't hit 8 by noon. The friend replies at 11:58. One more. Ren fires the last email. Friday's numbers land at 18%. The forecast didn't paralyze. It pruned choices, lowered rumination, and gave Ren a simple target to overfit. Foreknowledge became a tool, not a cage. What nobody tells you is that prediction and intervention are the same game in different voices. A forecast is a claim about how constraints play out. An intervention is a change to those constraints. In a block universe, both are coordinates, signals in the web that co-author the pattern. The question isn't can I shock the future? It's which loops do I want to close around me, and who do I invite to hold the ends? The reveal lands clean. Predictions don't trap you, ignoring them does. Treated as warnings or commitments, they become tools for alignment. Treated as dares, they become scripts you'll accidentally follow. So we pivot the frame of time one more notch. If knowing can be causal, maybe causation itself isn't a line pushing forward but a network that solves for consistency across the whole. Next, we redraw the arrows as edges in a web and watch paradoxes evaporate. Causality is graph, not lines but webs. Stop thinking arrows marching left to right. Our brains love straight lines because they're easy to narrate. Physics keeps handing us webs. The stakes are real. If you cling to a single lane of cause then effect, quantum experiments feel like lies and prediction games look impossible. Shift to a network, and the confusion turns into structure you can live with. Action first. Picture events as nodes, constraints as edges. Some edges come from light speed limits, who can signal to whom. Some come from conservation laws, energy, momentum, charge bookkeeping. Some come from boundary condition, low entropy past, the settings of your apparatus, the habits inside your head. Together, those edges define which configurations of the whole are allowed. The universe isn't pushing marbles across a table. It's solving a global puzzle where every piece must fit all at once. Here's where it gets interesting. Retrocausal models don't rewrite yesterday with a magic pen. They let certain edges run backward inside the graph, so hidden variables can depend on future measurement settings, while the overall solution remains consistent and respects no signaling. Many worlds takes another route. Keep all edges forward but branch the graph into a tree, and your measurement picks a path through it. Either way, the local feeling of causes, shoving the next second into existence, gives way to a web locking into a self-consistent picture. Human angle, detective style. A small-town investigator, Renee, stands in a late-night diner. The jukebox is quiet, one neon letter flickering. She's working a burglary that somehow produced no footprints on wet pavement. She maps what she has. A receipt timestamped 1:07 a.m., a camera across the street that always glitches at high humidity, a truck seen idling 2 blocks over, a cat's paw prints near the back. Renee pins photos and strings yarn, carving a graph. The trick comes when she uses the end to constrain the middle. The burglar sold the goods at 2:11 a.m. to a fence who only answers calls from a certain prepaid number. That end node forces a branch earlier. The call had to be placed at 1:40 from one of 3 towers. She checks those towers' logs, finds a match, pulls video near that corner, and finally the missing footprints problem dissolves. The burglar left through the alley awning. She never needed a film reel. She needed a web with enough edges to collapse ambiguity. Meanwhile, in physics, we do this with math. We draw causal graphs, DAGs when we're lucky, loopy structures when we're honest, and ask which joint probability distributions are compatible. Quantum correlations violate classical constraints but still live inside a wider web that forbids signaling faster than light. The weirdness is the web's geometry, not a broken rule. Complication. Paradoxes show up when you demand one privileged present to order your edges. Drop that and most paradoxes evaporate. The grandfather story, go back, prevent your own birth, isn't a solution to the network's constraints. It's an inconsistent set of nodes that can't be embedded. Self-consistent loops, though, are fine. You can send a message that helps ensure its own sending, as long as the loop closes without contradictions. Our prediction game lived there. So does the delayed choice drama. You're selecting edges that make the whole coherent. Micro-story. A software team deploys a feature flag at noon. Customer support tickets spike at 12:06. By 12:10, the on-call engineer Tam flips the flag off. Post-mortem time. If you narrate linearly, you'll fight about whose minute caused the outage. Instead, they draw the web. Code path A connects to database B only when flag F is on. Cache C invalidations fan out at T plus 1 minute. An external service throttles at 500 requests per second. A stale configuration D makes C's invalidations explode. The outage is the graph lighting up in a pattern. The fix isn't go back in time. It's change edges D and F so future configurations can't satisfy the error pattern. Impact lands here. Once the web locks, your path through it feels like discovery, not invention. That's not defeat. It's recognition that agency is about which edges you can add, remove, or reinforce from inside the system. You tighten the graph so the outcomes you want become the only consistent solutions reachable from your state. Commitments, policies, habits, they're new edges. Allies, norms, laws, edges. Training that changes how you parse cues, edges. The future isn't a fog you pierce. It's a set of solutions narrowing as edges accumulate. What nobody tells you when they sell choice as a spark is that sparks don't steer networks. Edges do. That's why prediction and intervention felt like the same game with different voices. A forecast names a likely solution given current edges. An intervention adds or removes edges until a better solution is the one that fits. The web view turns anxiety into tools. Find leverage points, not epiphanies. Human angle, one last case file. A teenager keeps skipping first period. Parents plead. Nothing changes. Then a counselor maps the graph. Bus schedule late. First period teacher marks tardies as absences. Cafeteria runs out of breakfast by 8:05. Anxiety spikes when hungry. They shift the edges. Earlier bus card, breakfast voucher. Teacher switches to tardy warnings with a grace window. 2 weeks later, attendance stabilizes. No sermons, just a web rewire. So stop thinking lines. Start thinking webs. And then ask the only question that matters in this frame. How do you live without going numb? You don't need to be vague. You need to be precise about edges. Next, we'll watch people who learn to build the ones that hold when everything shakes. Meaning after the shock, how people actually live this. You've seen the web. You've felt the chill. Now we talk about how people carry it and still move with heat. Stakes first. If you stare at the block too long, nihilism starts whispering. If it's all laid out, why try? That's the cheap exit. The real work is learning to be specific. Purpose isn't magic, it's constraint you author, repeated until it bites. Hope mechanism, how minds adapt without self-deception. First, the fear is real, loss of mystery can feel like loss of meaning. But 3 psychological levers help people stabilize and then move. Control reallocation. Instead of trying to control outcomes, you control inputs and constraints. Anxiety drops when you stop wrestling what you never held and grab what you can change. Sleep, schedule, training, allies, rules. Precision replaces rumination. Attribution shift. You replace moralizing, I'm defective, with mechanistic diagnostics. My edges make this result. Shame loosens, curiosity rises. That swap fuels better experiments and faster repairs. Compassion upgrade. Seeing behavior as pattern under constraints enlarges empathy for yourself and others. Blame shrinks into accountability. Cruelty has less air. You look for leverage, not villains. Micro-story, despair, right arrow acceptance, right arrow agency. Layla is 29, smart, exhausted. She watches a determinism video at 2 a.m. and spirals. If it's fixed, nothing matters. For a week, she drifts late to work, doom-scrolling, brittle with friends. In therapy, she names the fear, "I'm just a passenger." The therapist hands her a pen and a sticky note. "Write 3 edges you can set tonight." Layla writes, "Phone sleeps in kitchen. Lights out at 11. Text on a Wednesday." It feels insultingly small. Night 1, she fails 2 of 3. The note stays on the door anyway. Week 2, she reads about entropy and records and realizes her panic is a record too, a pattern that can be edited. Acceptance isn't surrender, it's a pivot. She stops arguing with the block and starts designing within it. She adds edges, prep lunch the night before, calendar alarms for water, a rule to stand up after each meeting. She tells Anna she's scared of going numb. Anna says, "Let us be boring together for a month." They swap Sunday lists and send 30-second check-ins. By week 4, the shape of her days changes. Fewer late-night spirals, more quiet mornings. When she snaps at a coworker, she texts an apology template she drafted when calm. She isn't floating, she's specific. The despair that started as nothing matters has become my edges matter. The block didn't shrink her. It steadied the page so she could write straighter. Watch athletes who train automaticity. A sprinter stands behind the blocks, heart drumming. Months earlier, she wrote micro-edges into her graph. Drive phase at 30 meters, relax the jaw, eyes down, don't chase the runner in lane 4. These aren't slogans, they're instructions that change muscle recruitment and oxygen use. Gun goes. Her body follows edges she practiced until they were the only path that fit under pressure. From inside, it feels like flow. In the block, it's a world line dense with rehearsed choices. Artists do the same. A jazz pianist aria spends dawn hours running voicings in all keys, metronome, brutal left-hand discipline. On stage that night, the drummer drops a polyrhythm that could derail everything. Aria doesn't roll dice. She reaches for a cluster her hands can find in the dark because she paid for that pathway with boring mornings. The solo blooms. The crowd calls it freedom. She knows its specificity. Surgeons live where precision doesn't blink. A resident crews drills steps for a vascular anastomosis until his hands stop rushing. The attending leans in, "See the wall, don't catch it." Later, in a bleeder, the room tightens. Cruz's world line includes the constraint "slow down when it speeds up." He does. The artery seals. That's meaning with a pulse, not a slogan. Human angle, grief refrained. In a block, your person exists along their full stretch. What do you do with the ache here where their voice doesn't answer? Some people build a standing wave, rituals that superimpose traces. Every Thursday, a son cooks his mother's soup, humming her off-key chorus. He texts the recipe to his sister, adds a note about the time she burned the onions. Those acts reinforce edges that keep a region of the block legible and near. He isn't pretending they're back. He's maintaining a channel to the coordinates where love still resolves. Ethics persists because you are still the process that chooses inside constraints. Determinism doesn't absolve, it clarifies where leverage sits. A teacher in a tough school stops believing pep talks will overpower hunger and noise. She fights for a breakfast program, reorders seating, scripts call and response to cut through chaos. Discipline shifts from punishment to scaffolding. Kids start turning in pages. The teacher's agency isn't a spark from outside physics. It's a design for edges that make attention possible. Complication. Determinism doesn't equal passivity. It demands engagement because every outcome you complain about is a solution to current edges. If you want a different one, you need to alter them. That's harder than venting. It means budgets, schedules, alliances, sleep, nutrition, boundaries, checklists, unsexy things that move graphs. It also means empathy where graphs are tight and options narrow. How determinism reduces anxiety and increases compassion. Anxiety often feeds on counterfactual fantasies. What if I had, what if I don't? And on overownership of outcomes. Determinism narrows attention to levers you actually have, cutting the infinite branch shatter. You plan, then you rest. Compassion grows when you see others' behavior as the output of histories and constraints. You still set boundaries. You drop contempt. You ask, what edge would help here? Instead of, what's wrong with you? Microstory, close and ordinary. Two friends, Mina and Jay, are tired of drifting. They meet Sundays with coffee and laptops. Each writes 3 constraints for the week. One thing they'll remove, one they'll add, one they'll tell. Remove, uninstall the app that eats hours after 10 p.m. Add, lay out shoes by the door, run before breakfast on Tuesday and Thursday. Tell, text a draft paragraph to the other by Wednesday noon. They repeat for 6 weeks. Mina's book pages stack. Jay's blood pressure slides down. Neither found a mystical flame. They built rails. Here, where compatibilism cashes out. Responsibility becomes about the edges you maintain. You don't decide kindness in a vacuum. You make it easier to happen. Default replies drafted, apologies practiced, a rule to pause before sarcasm, a list of questions to ask when your kid stomps in. Failure isn't proof of futility. It's feedback about where a graph still lets the old pattern fire. Meanwhile, joy stops being something you chase like prey and becomes resonance when edges align with values. A volunteer learns not to sign up for everything. She picks 1 clinic, 2 shifts a month, commits for a year. The web settles. She shows up. Faces become names, names become urgencies, urgencies become skill. She stops scrolling champion posts and starts packing the exact box a family needs. That's meaning with weight, not vibes. There's a reveal here that surprises people who came for cosmic awe. Alignment is writing tighter constraints that make better futures real. It's not wishcraft. It's friction engineering. You design environments and relationships that shape your policy. You choose inputs that sharpen perception. You ask for stakes you can't ignore. Microstory with stakes. A small community keeps losing teens to late-night street racing. Town meetings shout, nothing shifts. Someone maps the web. Empty lots, no lights, boredom, pride, no safe speed space. They fund a Friday night track program, open the high school shop for mods with adults, bring in EMTs to teach trauma response, pair kids with mechanics they admire. 6 months later, the illegal meets thin. Not because teenagers stopped loving speed. Because the graph offered a path that fit pride and skill without funerals. Meaning isn't optional. It's the constraint that shapes the path. You can float and let current edges decide, or you can write some. Determinism won't do the writing for you. It holds the page steady while you move the pen. Engineering your world line, constraints as tools. We said meaning is constraint you author. Now we turn it into craft, stakes first. Every habit, environment, and relationship you touch is a tool that sculpts your path. If you don't pick the tools, the default ones pick you. Advertising algorithms, stress loops, the easiest dopamine. This isn't self-help frosting on physics. It's the practical side of a block where edges steer outcomes. Action, start with commitment devices. Constraints you consent to because you want the future they make easier. You set a public deadline, share a draft calendar, put money on the line with a friend who will donate to a rival cause if you slip. You don't trust willpower. You redesign the payoff matrix so the good path is cheaper. Social contracts are the next tier. A weekly writing group that expects pages. A running partner on the corner at 6:10 a.m., gloves on. A team agreement. New features can't ship without a rollback plan. These aren't vibes, they're edges you can point to. Friction hacks matter when you don't have authority. You add steps between you and the habit you're trying to starve. Remove apps from the home screen, disable autoplay, move snacks to the top shelf, put the phone to sleep in another room at 9:30. You reduce steps toward what you want more of. Put the guitar on a stand at eye level, lay out gym clothes, pin the document you're avoiding to the dock. Your brain follows gradients. Make the gradient obvious. Human angle. One decision rerouted a life because constraints changed. Tessa worked night shifts and meant to apply to nursing school when things calmed down. They didn't. A friend slid an application packet across the diner table and set a rule. We fill one field together every breakfast. Tessa taped tuition dates inside her locker, moved to day shifts, arranged childcare with her sister on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Tiny edges multiplied. 14 months later, she was studying in a library, yawning, alive. Magic? No. She stopped asking for motivation and started collecting constraints. Impact? Small changes propagate along the web, shifting outcomes you won't see for months. Add sleep and the argument you would have had never happens. Remove notifications and the hour you would have lost becomes 10 quiet paragraphs. Consistency compounds because records pile up in one direction. Your engineering entropies push to favor the shape you want. Complication. Beware magical thinking. Constraints aren't wishes. Bodies have limits, money runs out, biases exist, systems push back. Respect physical and social ceilings so your plan isn't a fantasy that punishes you for being mortal. And be honest about failure patterns. If "I'll just try harder" shows up, you're out of tools. Switch to structural moves, change the room, move the chair, tell a person, alter the sequence, remove a door, add a timer. Micro stories that bite. A coder keeps breaking production on Fridays. They don't swear to be more careful. They change the edge. No Friday deploys, mandatory pair review for risky diffs, feature flags only. A couple keeps fighting about dishes at 11 p.m. They stop negotiating feelings and buy a second drying rack. Set a 9 p.m. kitchen cutoff. Play a 3-minute song while they clean together. A high schooler keeps missing homework because siblings crowd the table. The family buys noise-canceling headphones, puts a lamp in a corner, agrees on a 45-minute quiet block. None of these solve the world. They move the path. What nobody tells you is that authorship is choosing the constraints that choose you. That means curating inputs like your life depends on it, because it does. The 5 voices you hear most are edges. The first screen you see at wake is an edge. The snack within arm's reach at 4 p.m. on a bad day is an edge. You don't have to be a monk. You do have to be deliberate. Human angle softer. A painter, Eli, kept restarting canvases. He hired a friend to sit in the studio twice a week and say nothing. The friend read a book, sipped tea, looked up at the same times each hour. Eli's brush stopped hesitating because the room now had a heartbeat that wasn't his anxiety. 2 months later, a show hung. The friend's name wasn't on the label. It was in the edges. Complication again. Beware constraints that look like tools but are traps. Always-on cultures, accountability groups that shame, diets that burn muscle and will. Good constraints lower cognitive load and raise clarity. Bad ones drain dignity. Test by feel and by data. Sleep, mood, output, relationships. Keep what moves the graph in the right direction. Drop what just makes you smaller. Reveal. In a block universe, authorship isn't a miracle. It's precision. You look at the web, find leverage, and write constraints that make better futures real. The path doesn't open because you hope. It snaps into place because you made the solution the only one that fits. Transition. There's one boundary left that shapes every edge you write, the initial whisper of order the cosmos began with. If your arrow inherits that boundary, then meaning runs all the way down. Let's go there. The boundary that aims the arrow. We've been engineering edges on our own little maps, but all those maps inherit their tilt from a larger landscape. Stakes first. If the universe began with an unusual kind of order, then the arrow you feel isn't a quirk of your brain, it's an inheritance. And if that boundary could have been different, the meaning you build might sit in a wider story than you think. Action. Roll the film all the way back, then freeze. Not at a singular bang, but at an early universe remarkably smooth. Temperatures nearly uniform, tiny ripples, matter and radiation in near-perfect balance. That smoothness is low entropy for a cosmos dominated by gravity. Here's the strange part. For gases in a box, uniform means high entropy. For gravity, uniform means poised to do dramatic work, clump into stars and galaxies, write records in light and rock, make chemistry in kitchens. That low entropy boundary is the loaded spring. Wind it at the start, and everything that follows has a direction to fall. What nobody knew at breakfast before modern cosmology is that your afternoon coffee sits on that spring. The second law's push, entropy increasing, needed a beginning that was improbably ordered. We didn't tune the law, we inherited the start. That's why arrows line up across scales, eggs, memories, galaxies, economies. We ride the same gradient. Human angle. A teacher draws a chalk line across a board and says to her class, "This is the early universe, quiet." Then she dots the line with tiny bumps. These bumps will become everything you've heard of. The kids laugh. Months later, one of them loses a grandfather and stares at a night sky, remembering the line. The grief softens half a click when she thinks, the arrow that took him is the same arrow that lit these stars. It doesn't fix the ache, it gives it a place. Complication. Cosmology doesn't end the argument with one picture. Some suggest final boundary conditions, a far future smoothness that pairs with the past to aim arrows in both directions. Others explore cyclic models where bounces reset order, stitching arrows across epochs. There are proposals where time emerges from correlations without a fundamental clock, or where our patch is one of many bubbles, each with its own boundary story. These aren't bedtime fables. They're attempts to make the low entropy start make sense without hand-waving. Meanwhile, measurements keep tightening the frame. The cosmic microwave background whispers the early conditions with exquisite precision. Tiny temperature variations map like freckles across the sky. Those freckles grew into galaxies, those galaxies into clusters, those clusters into scaffolds that guided starbirth and supernovas that seeded carbon into clouds that built you. The arrow's genealogy runs through that map. Impact. Past-future asymmetry looks less like a metaphysical decree and more like boundary math. Start simple, and typical evolutions generate structure, records, and beings like us who can remember. Start scrambled, and you don't get room for diaries, fossils, or violins. The boundary doesn't choose your song. It makes songs possible. Microstory. A grad named Noor sits in a windowless office reprocessing microwave background data. Her screen shows a lumpy oval, noise reduced, foreground subtracted. She writes a note to herself. Every journal entry I have exists because that blotchy ellipse was quiet. She doesn't tweet it. She prints it and tapes it inside a closet where she keeps boxes of unsent letters. Months later, she opens the closet to pack and stops at the note, smiling at how grand and ordinary the truth feels. Complication again. Heat death looms in some models, a future where free energy dwindles, stars gutter out, black holes evaporate over stupendous timescales, and gradients flatten. That picture can feel like a verdict against meaning. It is. It's a statement about distant bookkeeping. Between the whisper of order at the start and the quiet of the far future lies a window wide enough for civics, mercy, art, and kids on scooters. The worth of a sentence isn't diminished by the period at its end. Reveal. Different boundary stories imply different meaning geometries. A cosmos with a final condition that mirrors the first might invite tales of symmetry and return. A bouncing universe might suggest resilience woven into the fabric. A one-shot expansion into heat death might frame meaning as density within a finite stanza. None of these make ethics optional. They set the key signature. Human angle close to the kitchen. A couple argues gently over dinner about whether it matters that everything will cool. He says, "It steals something." She says, "It gives something." They look at their kid coloring a crooked sun and agree on one thing. The kid needs a world this decade, not a promise in a trillion years. They fund the library fundraiser, fix the leaky sink, and teach the kid to stir the soup without splashing. The arrow they can touch is local. That's enough to act. What nobody tells you when you first hear low entropy at the beginning is that it's an invitation, not a shrug. You inherited a gradient you didn't request. You get to decide whether to waste it or weave with it. Choices become coordinates, yes, but coordinates that lean with the first whisper. You can line your edges with that lean. So we circle back to the coffee and the promise we made. Your next move is a fixed coordinate that still needs you to live it. The room didn't choose you. The boundary made you possible. Now you choose how precisely you'll aim. The personal loop, back to the room you're in. We're back in the room. The coffee is cooling. The promise stands. Your future is already in the room with you. It isn't waiting behind a curtain. It's a coordinate your world line will pass. That can feel paralyzing, or it can feel precise. Let's make it precise. Stakes right here on the table. Your next move is fixed in the block, but it still needs you to live it with the reasons you've been building. Memory, fear, hope. Those aren't missed. They're records in the ledger you carry. The mug's chipped rim means something because your hands have learned that edge. The text you're avoiding glows brighter because you've given it weight with past delays. You're not a spectator to this coordinate. You're the process that makes it what it is. Action simple and specific. You glance at the time. You told yourself you'd decide, send the hard message, or stall. In the block, there's a path where you stall, doom scroll, top off the cup, let the hour drift. There's a path where you send short, honest, clean. Those aren't abstractions, they're two nearby routes your policy can make reachable or not. You've already been engineering edges, the phone on Do Not Disturb, a draft half-written last night, a friend expecting a screenshot by the end of the hour. Those edges didn't kill freedom, they moved it. Human angle. Your memories show up like landmarks. Your dad's quiet before apologies, the teacher who wrote "keep going" in red, the fight where you said the line you swore you'd never say. Those traces are coordinates you can still orient by. Your fears, too, are records, heart rate spikes near certain names, a jaw that locks at a tone. Hopes. They're plans not yet encoded, sketches of constraints you're close to writing. The ledger holds all three. The question is, are they real? Which ones do you amplify with the next edge? Here's the micro story folded into your day. You put the mug down and open the draft. Your policy, the trained part of you, says start with truth, then ask, then set a next step. Your fingers hover. A memory intrudes, the night you waited too long and made it worse. That record nudges your gradient. You type, I need to say this clearly. You name the problem, you propose the call, you set a time, you add a line you learned from the therapist. If that time doesn't work, offer two. You attach the doc. You hit send. Small, sure. Also a coordinate that moves downstream edges you can't see yet. Complication. Resistance pipes up, but if it's already fixed, what did any of that matter? It mattered because the coordinate isn't just message sent or message stalled. It's the full microstructure, the reasons activated, the constraints engaged, the skill applied. In the block, those features distinguish your path from the neighboring one. From inside, that's authorship. You test it again in the next 15 minutes. You stand, rinse the cup, and move the phone to the hallway. You set a 25-minute timer and open a blank page titled Constraints I Will Keep. You write 3. Call when angry, no Friday deploys, shoes by the door. You're not manifesting. You're adding edges to a web that will outlast your mood at 3 p.m. That list lives on a surface you'll see at 6:30 tomorrow. The ledger updates. That's action in a block. Human angle one more time with the heart. Grief breathes in this room too. You pick up a sweater that still holds a trace of someone you miss. You sit for a minute and let the ache be geometry. You text a photo of the sweater to someone who loved them with one story you haven't told. That message doesn't bring anyone back. It lays a new record across old ones, tightening a strand of the web that will hold you on a worse night. Love doesn't flow away. You keep building the channel where it resonates. Impact. You are the path through the block that only you can traverse. That isn't a hallmark line, it's an architectural fact. No one else has your records, your constraints, your practiced moves. The precision you bring, what you ask, what you refuse, the bedtime you actually keep, the joke you don't make, the apology you do, writes coordinates that shape the neighborhood around you. People adjust. Systems tilt. Your world line isn't isolated, it's a tight braid through others. When you make your path more honest, there's gets new edges too. Complication we can't hide. Some edges are steel. Illnesses arrive. Bills come due. Doors don't open because you're clever. The web resists. Compatibilism doesn't pretend otherwise. It asks for precision where you still have leverage and mercy where you don't. It keeps you from wasting your gradient on fights you can't win and points you at the ones you can. Reveal last and simple. You're not powerless, you're precise. The coffee's gone lukewarm. The message is sent. The list is on the fridge. You step into the hallway, look at the phone asleep, and decide which loop to close next. The future isn't waiting, it's written, and it still needs you to read it out loud. Your next coordinate. Look at what you did in the last few minutes. You made a coordinate real, not by escaping physics, but by getting precise inside it. That's the point we've been circling. Your life isn't waiting for permission from a cosmic clock. It's waiting for the next edge you choose to write. So here's your move. Before you close this window, set one constraint that will still exist tomorrow. Text someone a time. Put one rule on paper and tape it where you'll see it. Drop one friction between you and the habit that eats your evenings. That's not small. That's authorship right now in a universe that remembers. If you felt the shift, if grief softened a notch, if choice got sharper, if now became a dashboard you can actually use, don't just nod and scroll. Subscribe to Cosmic Ventures, not because numbers matter to us, but because this channel is how we keep building the edges that make these ideas stick. Every new episode is another constraint you can deploy. Clearer models, stronger tools, fewer myths. Hit subscribe and turn on notification so this doesn't become another insight you forget by morning. And if you want the next coordinate ready, here's what's coming. We're going inside your perception to test whether reality renders only what you can observe, and how your brain's update cycle can be hacked. It's the line between illusion and information, and it will change how you design your day. You'll see the trick your eyes pull, the lag your mind hides, and the leverage that gives you in the hour after this one. Your world line is already etched, but the precision is yours. Subscribe, stay with us, and bring a friend who needs this exact edge. We'll meet you at the next coordinate.